Hello. I believe this is streaming, but let me double check. Okay. Ooh. Awesome. Okay, happy Saturday, everybody. I hope you are having a beautiful morning, afternoon, great start to your weekend. For those of you who have been tuning in, welcome back. For those of you who may be new, hello, welcome. My name is Surya Pinto. I'm an artist here in Long Beach, California. I work in acrylic and watercolor, and we've been doing sessions on improving your art skills. So last week we learned about colors and color theory. So we learned about the color wheel, how to find the complementary colors, how to find what looks good together. Today we're going to learn about value scales. So what's a value scale? A value scale is, simply put, it's going from light to dark. So going from white to black and every kind of shade in between. So you can make a 7-part value scale, and I will show you an example. Here we go. So this is what a value scale looks like. It goes from white, you add a little bit of color at a time. So in this example, it's a black and white value scale. So all the shades of gray in between. No, my name says Mandy. So it's adding a little bit of black at a time until you get to black or your darkest color. So you can do these value scales with any color. It doesn't have to be black or white, but the importance and start to practice is to get those shades going and to have that understanding. So you're adding a little bit at a time every time. So we start with white, but you can also start with pencil. So I'm going to show you this is my sketchbook from 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. So it's a little bit worn down, but it's still a great example of a color scale with pencil. So what you do is you have plain white and you start softly with your pencil, softly, softly, softly. And the darker you go, the more pressure you apply. So maybe sometimes when we were kids, we were drawing with a pencil and it was like, you're scribbling really, really hard and, you know, making really dark lines. So when you're practicing your value scales, you're practicing how much pressure you're applying. So very, very light, very, very light. Okay, you're adding a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder until you're getting to these darker points where you're pressing really, really hard and getting a lot of pigment down on your paper. So if you're using pencil, it's the application. So it's pressing it lighter, 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 harder, 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 harder. If you're, using paints, then it's more blending. So you'll start with white, you'll add a tiny little bit of black, mix it in, that's your next color. Add a tiny bit more black, mix it in, that's your next color, and so on and so forth. So practicing your value scale, whether it's paint, whether it's pencil, whether it's crayon, it doesn't have to be white to black. That's kind of just the starting point typically, just so you can really see. You can do it in shades of blue, you can do it in shades of purple. I have a really great example. So once you start practicing that and you kind of have that down, value is what makes things look realistic. Value is what gives your painting or your drawing depth and makes it pop out. So once you get to a point where you're ready to maybe start a bigger painting or implement these ideas, you can do a little value study, is what it's called, of whatever you're going to make. So we can see from these two images, they're not detailed at all. They're just value blobs. So you see here, okay, this is a cliffside, right? The water is very, very light. As you go up the mountain, it's darker and darker. So when you go to do this as your real painting, you'll know this is the dark spot, this is the lighter spot, this is the medium spot, and your painting will have depth. What does this look like in real life, Surya? So I've got two examples for you, kind of the easier one and the more advanced one. So very, very basic. I drew some carrots. So you could see these carrots still look like they're coming out at you, right? There's different shades. You got this light part, you've got the darker part of the carrot here, the darker part where they're touching, darker part, and then it goes to a medium shade in here, and then obviously the white highlights. That's just about 3 values, but it still adds so much depth because it's not just one flat solid color. So you can start with something easy and small, maybe a circle, and maybe a fruit, something that's in your house. Maybe you have a tray of apples. Pick up an apple, put it down, and practice drawing first your value scale, and then you can try drawing the apple with those different values, kind of like you see here. So the darker parts are going to be darker, and then where the light hits is going to be a highlight. And you'll start noticing that. I was going to use this pot as an example. Pot, the light hits right here, there's a white highlight, and as we go out, it gets darker. Value scale in real life. Second example, a little bit more complex, but let me scooch. So this is a portrait I did of a friend of mine. I'll move this. And so as you can see, we can see the different highlights and different values based on where the light is hitting. So the light was hitting her face all through here in her neck. Those are the lighter values, the whites, right? And then as we get to, when you're crunching, there's a shadow here. In my armpit, look, there's a shadow there. So that's where it gets darker. Everything in between you can categorize as a different value. So when you mix your paints before and you look at your image before, you're looking at the different values. And once you start practicing your values, you can see them everywhere. I can see it in my own face. Here's the darker parts. Here's the highlight. But yeah, so darker highlights, darker shadows, whiter highlights, and that's what makes this painting look real. That's what gives this painting depth and that human touch. The more values you use in your artwork, the more realistic it's going to look, because in real life, things are complex. They have depth, they have different tones, they have different splashes of color. So once you can start practicing that value scale, then you can apply it to the color wheel that we learned last week. So when you're using colors, you use them in different values, so different lights and darks, and then different colors complementing it. And so that will help give a lot of life to your painting, a lot of depth to your painting, and kind of take it to the next level. So for homework this week, I want you guys all to practice your value scales. Like I said, you can do it with just a pencil, easy peasy. You don't even have to draw the boxes. Just practice going from light to dark. So if you need to, you can draw, like 5 or 7 boxes across of a piece of paper. Make the last one absolutely black. Let the first one be white and work your way to that scale, pressing a little bit harder as you go along. So that way you're leaving more pigment on the paper. So that is your homework this week. Practice your value scales. Once you get it down in black and white, try it with different colors. You can pick the colors that we did in the color wheel last week. You can make maybe 1 orange and then 1 blue and label it as complementary colors. One thing I would encourage you guys to start doing, if you've been loving these classes, is to get a sketchbook and make it your sketch art notebook. So for example, mine has, it's old. This thing is 10 years old, but I still use it today. So I would draw whatever my assignments were, and then write whatever notes I have. And that'll be really helpful because you can keep that and keep building upon it. So thank you for joining me today. Happy Saturday. Have a wonderful weekend. Practice your value scales.